Well, good evening, and that is the end of day one here on the streets of Montreal. Now, normally at this time when Marc and I do our race wrap-up, the sun is setting. Well, actually tonight the sun has pretty much set because we've been waiting for some breaking news. Now, after Sebastian Buemi started on the grid in 12th after having a collision this morning during pre-practice, the team ferociously tried, they prepared the car, they got it ready for the race, but it has just been announced that despite finishing the race in 4th, he has just been disqualified because that car that they spent 5 hours rebuilding from pretty much scratch has been deemed, according to the FIA, to be underweight. Now, the official news, they say after the race, the weight of the car was under the minimum weight of 880 kilos, despite the team adding 4 kilos of additional ballast to compensate for any weight variation in the rebuilt car. This was not enough. So, I mean, Marc, it was already going pretty badly for Sebastian Buemi. I mean, in a moment, I think we should talk about his massive outburst after the race that has now gone viral across social media. But I mean, what a disappointment for him, and I mean, unfair. Was it a mistake? What do you think?
It's so hard not to feel sorry for these guys because what happens in this situation is it's frantic, as you say. They were up against it. The mechanics did an incredible job simply to get the thing with 4 wheels back on it and push it out into the pit lane. And I've been in this situation before. You know, when you do that, you don't have time necessarily to take the careful, meticulous time to prepare and to weigh the car and measure things to the finest limits as you would normally. You kind of have to do what you need to do to get it out. And so what they've done is they've thrown 4 kilos of extra ballast, as you say, to try and make sure they are safe. Normally, you'd be measuring that down to the finest margins to keep it competitive. They've thrown 4 kilos at it. That's not enough. And what happens is they've changed so many components, one of which being the battery, which gave him that penalty in the first place, the grid penalty. What the teams have all said to me this evening is sometimes the batteries here in Formula E can have quite considerable weight differences from one to the other. You know, some of them, they're getting on a bit now, these batteries. I think there are some that have internal leaks and collect dielectric fluid in some of the cells, and gradually that just builds up as excess weight. Jean-Paul Drio told me that he thinks they've lost 11 kilos somewhere today, which is a huge amount on a racing car. They put 4 kilos of extra ballast on as safety, as we say. They already say they have a safety margin of 3 kilos, and the car was actually 4 kilos underweight. So 11 kilos is a huge amount to be under. So it's a real shame. I can't help feel sorry for them. It's probably not their fault on one hand, but if you keep tracing it further and further back, Seb shouldn't have crashed it earlier on.
Exactly. I mean, it was quite amazing that they actually, not only did they rebuild the car, but they actually got the performance out of the car. Because normally you must spend, a long time getting the setup right. But Sebastian still managed to climb from 11th on the grid, finish in 4th. Now, bearing in mind that at the point of when he thought he'd finished the race in 4th, at the end of the race, he exploded. I mean, I've never seen a reaction like it. I think some of the quotes from him calling poor Antonio Felix da Costa, which actually he called the wrong driver. He was actually meant to direct this at Robin Friends. He says, "You drive like a crazy guy," and he's called Daniel Abt a dirty man. I mean, what's going on? That has got to come down to just the pressure that is on his shoulders of wanting to win this championship.
There weren't many people he didn't shout at up and down this pit lane. He shouted at everybody. He has shown today, and he's done it before, unfortunately for him, he's shown a weakness. He cracks under pressure. He doesn't handle these situations very well. And this guy over here, Lucas di Grassi, has absolutely jumped all over that this weekend. We said even before they even got in a car here in Montreal that Seb looked unsettled. He was slightly uneasy. He was talking to journalists, questioning why some of the stories have been written about him over the course of this week. That's a man who's not in the right headspace for the championship decider. Now we go into tomorrow, and he's definitely not in the right headspace. Who's your money on? For me, it's this guy.
Well, he's got his work cut out because now he is 18 points behind Lucas di Grassi. So, I mean, Lucas is definitely going to be sleeping well tonight, that's for sure.
Much better.
Knowing that his day isn't going to be quite as challenging as he thought it was. But yeah, we've got to say, huge congratulations to Lucas. I mean, he really has been so focused on his own race, his own agenda. I mean, getting his that pole position as well. You know, I think it's his second pole of this season.
Well, he's done everything right, I think, in the situation, in the circumstances. But he's capitalised on these failings in here. And I just quickly, before we get onto them fully, I want to wrap up the rest of their weekend or their day, because it's all sorts going on, even above and beyond what we've already talked about. Buemi got hit right on lap 1. It was by Robin Frins. That was the reason that he went after him, looking for that argument after the race. But it damaged his suspension. He spent the whole stint of his first car with the steering wheel, as you may have seen, off to an angle going down the straights. That not only makes the car very difficult to handle, but it also impacts on the efficiency, because the wheels are not pointing straight. They're dragging effectively along the floor. So that just wasn't a great start anyway. He didn't have the best of starts anyway in the race. He got overtaken by a couple of people off the line. Again, those situations are where you need your head. You need to be calm and collected. He had an amazing duel with Daniel Abt, didn't he, all in a number of occasions. And the pit stop, the mid-race car swap, we need to talk about that, because Seb came in right behind Daniel Abt. They followed each other right the way along the pit lane, almost bumping each other, didn't they? Gesticulating, wasn't he? He was all over the place, even at that point.
What speed was Daniel Abt driving at? Because it looked like he was going too slow, but was he? Was he abiding by the minimum pit lane speed, or was he going slower?
He was on his limiter. He was on his pit lane limiter. Clearly, what that tells me is that these two teams have their limiters set ever so slightly different. There is a margin, and it probably only takes a mile an hour over the length of that very long pit lane to start closing up. So that was the first thing, and then they went into their pit stops. They got out of the driver change. Both went quite smoothly, but the Renault team, they're situated at the very last point on the pit lane, almost around the corner, aren't they, as you come out with your new car. Daniel Abt emerged first. He came along the pit lane, and what looked to me like an absolute slam dunk of an unsafe release, as Sebastian Buemi was pretty much released into his path. And then even after that, they went out through the pit lane exit. Both drivers, and there's another steward's decision that involves these two here, both drivers got a reprimand from the stewards today for breaching the speed limit under full course yellows. And what happened there was, coming out of that pit lane exit, they, I think, both assumed, as you would normally under racing conditions, you get to the pit lane exit line, you release your pit lane speed limiter, and off you go into the race. The race was under full course yellows at that point, so you had to remain on the pit limiter. I think both drivers forgot, they sped up, they suddenly realised, then slowed down again. Daniel Abt ran into the back of him because he wasn't watching what Seb was doing, and there was more gesticulation, and it was chaos. So they both got a reprimand officially from the stewards on that.
But the fact that Sebastian Buemi didn't get penalised for the unsafe release, I mean, now I suppose it doesn't really matter, but at the time, he probably should have done.
I think he should have done, and I think most people here think he should have done. The one mitigating fact, if you really want to be lenient on him, is his position in the pit lane. Because he's almost round that corner, it's very difficult. It's very different to all the other teams where you come out of your box, you pull into the fast lane and off you go. He's kind of already in the fast lane where he pulls out. So maybe you could argue that. For me, it was a slam dunk, but hey, there's far more at play now.
Exactly. And what about his teammate, Nico
honestly,
Prost?
I mean, we haven't even gotten to Nico Prost yet. Goodness me. Nico Prost.
So much action.
You've already seen some images of his car that the boys are working on here. It's in a right state, and one of the reasons for that is this is his first car. So after the pit stop, after the driver change, they park up his first car, as is normal. They put the battery, the auxiliary battery, not the main battery that powers the car, but the auxiliary battery that powers all the auxiliary systems, small 12-volt battery. They popped that on charge in the pit lane to keep it topped up. They had a charger failure, which failed to regulate the current going into that battery. Because no one's watching it, because they're concentrating on the race, it essentially cooked the battery. It burst into flames, melted. We actually had the fire brigade turn up in the pit lane, and they've doused the entire car with the sort of foam or powder fire extinguisher, which is horrible stuff. That stuff, I can promise you, is a mechanic's nightmare because it gets everywhere. These boys have now got to clean it. More seriously than that, though, the guys, in fact, Nico Prost told me himself, he's pretty sure that fire has damaged the motor in his car. And if that's the case and they have to change it, he'll be getting a 10-place grid penalty tomorrow, which just compounds the misery that these guys have had.
And that's not good, actually, when you start thinking about the team's championship, which we kind of thought Renault had wrapped up. But I think the points gap in the team's championship is now down to about 33 points.
Yeah.
So actually,
these boys
having Nico Prost challenging for top points is going to be a big problem.
They've gone from what should be a very comfortable position coming into this weekend to now being so much on the back foot that they have to get a perfect day tomorrow. And the way things have gone today, no one would put their money on that happening, would they? So it's such a swing. Great for us.
Lucky we didn't put money on the bets when we had our conversation this morning and you were going Buemi and Renault.
I know. Let's quickly talk about what happened up pit lane, because there were a few other things. I just want to very quickly, we must congratulate to Cheetah, because a superb result for them.
You kind of feel like that result has been completely swallowed up by the rest of the news, but again, I mean, a double podium.
Yeah.
And that's twice, in 2 consecutive weekends.
That's right. A really good day. Sarrazan's best result since he joined that team. Very close with Buemi. The closing laps, in fact, they made contact with each other. I mean, his race could have been over before the checkered flag, Sebastian.
He was so aggressive.
So aggressive.
Really, really fighting for those points. And you think, hang on a minute, surely it would have been better to finish 4th than not at all. But he was not giving up on that fight. Well, he did in the end, I suppose.
Great day for them. I think Virgin also, got to shout them out, because they had a terrible qualifying. And the qualifying was actually down to a slight hiccup, really. It's, what people often term finger trouble. One of the engineers, and I'm sure he's feeling terrible, one of the guys at DS actually put the wrong maps into both cars, so that during qualifying, when Sam and Pachito went to switch to their 200 kilowatts, the maximum power for their flying lap, the car didn't respond, so they were stuck on 170 kilowatts, and that's how they did their qualifying lap and struggled massively. So
what a shame.
So disappointing. But then, given that, getting into the race, they moved forward so quickly as a pair, picking off people all the way through, and I thought they did a great job. Pachito had a disappointing crash. It was his own, it was a driver error, no one else to blame for that. He's absolutely desolate, because he had such a good result on. He's a real racer, that guy, and he was looking good, and that's a real shame.
Disappointing one for Mahindra as well. I mean, very unusual for them not to neither of the drivers really anywhere near the top of the podium. That's
right. Nick Heidfeld obviously didn't finish the race, hit by Duval. I mean, I was actually talking to Nick Heidfeld just after the race, when Duval wandered up to sort of apologise to Nick Heidfeld for the incident, because you've got to say it was his fault. Duval sort of says he went into the corner, he saw Heidfeld coming, tried to close the gap, and then he lost him from within his mirrors and assumed he'd sort of backed out of it, so went to turn in. Nick hadn't backed out of it, he was right there. When you talk to Nick Heidfeld, he says his team had just told him that his lap target had changed. He was going for one less lap, meaning that he had to push hard for those last few laps. So he was trying to push. Duval thought he had so much more energy than Nick Heidfeld that he wouldn't be under threat. It was just total confusion, but unfortunately it ended Nick's race.
With Nick that didn't finish the race. And then Felix Rosenquist had an issue with he hit the wall.
He hit the wall.
Bit of a mistake, and then affected his steering.
Yeah, he hit the wall. The car was crabbing along. He was in P4 and he ended up P10. Excuse me. So he got a point. And also they had a slow pit stop. Unfortunately for them, Felix got caught at the point where he was due to exit from his car change. There was just a string of cars coming down, and to avoid an unsafe release, the team had to hold him for a good 4 seconds. So he lost 4 seconds during that period. And the only other one I really want to mention, because it's a bit of a cock-up, but I find this almost slightly amusing, is that Mauro Engel. So we talked about the 2 Virgin guys doing their qualifying lap on 170 kilowatts because of the wrong maps in the car. So in their situation, the drivers switched to 200, nothing happened. Poor old Mauro Engel, his car was programmed perfectly well. He forgot to
press the button.
Forgot to press the button. I mean, unbelievable. So he did his qualifying lap on 170, and when you do that, you've got no hope.
Wouldn't you notice? Would you not notice going out? I mean, first of all, hands up to him to actually holding up his hands and admitting it. But
Watch out. Let's move over here.
The car of the moment.
This is the car.
But quickly finishing off the Mauro Engel. I mean, surely you would have noticed while doing a lap that it didn't have enough power.
Yeah, you would think so, and I don't really understand how on earth it got to that stage, how the team are not screaming at him on the radio, I don't know. But look, we've been waiting so long for this car to come back. In fact, the whole pit lane has been waiting for this car, because none of the cars could be released from Parc Fermé until a final decision was made on Sebastian Buemi's car. I mean, now we are, hours after the race, and it's finally come back.
Actually, it's not that one. No, because that's got the original livery on it.
Right.
It's the other
both
one.
Of their cars they've got held, so the other one I'm sure is on its way. But yeah, I think we've covered them enough, but that is so disappointing. And
let's finish on a high.
Yeah.
Talk about Lucas de Grassi and his win.
Look,
maybe we could wander over and drink the champagne.
this was, Lucas, as I said earlier, Lucas and the Abt Schaeffler Audi Sport team were on the back foot coming into the weekend. The odds were against them. They were trailing in both championships, weren't they? If you'd been a betting person, you would have put all your money on Renault. They probably have the quicker car. They've had the most successful season by a mile. Yet look where we are now. It has turned around completely, and that is mainly because Lucas di Grassi and his team did a pretty much near perfect job today. And whatever happened over on the blue team, the red team didn't put a foot wrong, did they?
And also Daniel Abt, got to hand it to him as well. I mean, he did a great job, in terms of defending off other cars to, I suppose, help Lucas di Grassi.
Absolutely, yeah.
And his qualifying performance has been really good. I mean, I think him and Lucas now are virtually matched in terms of qualifying performance, who's out-qualified each other. So it'll be interesting to see how he does tomorrow and if he can help Lucas in this championship fight again.
I think so, and I think those two, their two trophies and the champagne you've just been looking at are testament to that. These teams together have worked very well. Daniel Abt, you're right, he did a great job and been very, very solid, helped his teammate out and did everything he could to help his teammate out today. He wasn't giving up, was he? No. He chased down Sebastian Buemi all the way and made it difficult for him. And, he was part of the reason, Daniel Abt was part of the reason that Sebastian Buemi was so rattled because he was under pressure all the way through and he can't handle it. We certainly couldn't handle it today. I would say, so the only other thing to mention here with Daniel is that he also got a reprimand, as I said earlier, for that speeding under full course yellows. Lucas di Grassi, very, very switched on in using his fan boost at the restart after the safety car because that gave him the boost.
That was brilliant.
It was great.
But that just shows how smart he is, as always. If it had been another driver, I don't think they would have been so smart. Lucas di Grassi always thinking one step ahead of the others.
No, absolutely. I think actually you've got to look at Jean-Eric Vergne and say, because he had fan boost as well, why didn't he think to do it? Actually, Jean-Eric Vergne got to the point, beyond the point of his state of charge of the battery where he could actually use his fan boost, but he never got to use it. But yes, di Grassi, solid all the way through, very intelligent drive, handled the pressure perfectly, and he sets up an unbelievable day tomorrow.
An incredible day for tomorrow. Bearing in mind that, remember, in Season 1, Lucas di Grassi finished third. In Season 2, Lucas di Grassi finished second. Well, it's looking good that in Season 3 he could be crowned champion. But I suppose we will not find out until the sun sets tomorrow on the streets of Montreal. Make sure you do join us for the race live from 3:30 p.m. local time. We'll see you then.